resilience, dialogue to implementations. These series are structured in 3 specific areas: remittance families, private sector innovation and digitalization, and enabling environment. The purpose of this series are twofold. First, to understand the new market realities governing the remittances ecosystem in these difficult times. And second, identify and share best practices to address the challenges and opportunities. The findings of these sessions would also directly feed into the agenda setting of the upcoming eGFRID Summit, this coming June 16 and 17, focusing on Africa and to be organized on the occasion of the International Day of Family Remittances. So today's session is organized and will be moderated by 3 among the 40 renowned organizations part of the UN-led Remittances Community Task Force, or RCTF, that was created over a year ago. It is my honor on behalf of IFAD to introduce the moderator of this tract on this second session, and namely Amadou Cissé, who is the Executive Director of the African Institute for Remittances at the African Union, present here on the screen. The other moderators, unfortunately, are not present at this time, but you will be introduced during the sessions. But this will be Saad Farouk, who is the Senior Advocacy Manager of the Mobile Money Program at GSMA. And lastly, Barry Cooper, who is the Technical Director at the international think tank SEMFRI. Their technical reputation precedes them, and we are eager to listen to their exchange in this panel. So before we proceed, I would like to share some housekeeping aspects. The first 2 tracks will run back to back and be followed by a 15-minute coffee break before the third and last track. Tracks will run for 45 minutes, including opportunity for questions and answers up to 10 minutes to address the questions from the audience. Please do not hesitate to submit questions, as this will be answered by speakers in the eGFRID website in case we run out of time, which we probably will. And these tracks have simultaneous interpretation, English and French. And the little globe at the bottom of the screen will allow you to select your preferences. For those that have an iPad, you have 3 little dots and you can select interpretation and choose. So lastly, I would like to inform you that the session will be recorded for further viewing and reference for those who are not able to attend. And this said, without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Amadou Cissé for the first track. So Amadou, you have the floor, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Pedro. Welcome to everybody for this webinar today. As is been mentioned by Pedro, this is a part of the series of discussions on remittances in times of crisis. This webinar is leading us to the upcoming GFRD, the Global Remittance, the Global Forum on Remittance and Investment and Development. Today, for our session, we'll be discussing some very key interesting issues on remittances. It is about, in a nutshell, the linkages between remittance and development. How can remittance contribute to the development, but in general, how can remittance better improve the life of those who receive remittance on the continent? We'll be focusing on the continent because there are a lot of things, there are a lot of families that depend on remittance on the continent. In this time of crisis, have shown how critical was this type of flows to the family that are recipients of these remittances. Today, we have very great speakers. Let me start by introducing them. We have Mary Setrana, who is a senior lecturer at the Center for Migration Studies, University of Ghana, Accra. We'll also have Orria Goni, who is also the team leader of the SDG Financing and South South Cooperation team in UNDP. And lastly, we will have Mr. Jules Touka. Jules will join us very soon, hopefully. He has some challenges, but we hope that he'll be joining us. Jules will give us some key aspect of the regional approaches on remittances, while Mary will discuss with some key issues when it comes to remittance and leveraging remittance for those who receive remittances at the national level and what needs to be done. And definitely, we will have the point of view of the international organizations here. We'll have the point of view of the UNDP in general. Let me start with Mary. Mary, as you know, remittance is a very critical issue. It is they are very critical resources for those who receive remittance. But we know that it is also private to private. It is person to person remittances. But how we as international organizations or governments or regional organizations, how are we really, why should we be interested in this kind of flows And is it really relevant to think of improving the life of those who receive remittance through any kind of policies? Mary.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amadou. And thank you for your audience. Thank you for being with us. So before I start as an academic, let me put my discussion in context. And so your question, to answer your question, I want to do that by letting us know the three broad perspectives when we talk about my remittances and development. And so the three perspectives, the first one argues that yes, remittances are just like any other income anyway. So there is, why should we pay special attention to remittances? The second school of thought thinks that remittances have influence on people's behavior, especially those who receive the remittances. And so because of that, some studies have indicated that people of such do not work, or perhaps maybe unemployed. And so when you look at some statistics, for instance, the Ghana Statistical Service data, it shows that people who receive remittances are usually unemployed. And so having negative impact on development, sorry. And the third one talks about migration and development, remittances and development, where they allude to the fact that remittances have positive impact on development. And so when we talk about the last part, we say remittances have impact on development. They are talking about increases in investment in human and physical capital, among others. And so these are the broad perspectives. Those who think that is no news. The second group that thinks that it promotes negative development, if there is anything like that. And the third one talks about positive development. And I guess that is what has been the interest of many African countries. That's why we are on this table today. And so pushing the argument also further, why do we need to be here? We need to know that data shows that remittances represent a significant contribution to development. And in terms of Africa, it's a source of foreign exchange, supplementing household income for purchasing basic services. And when we zoom it down to West Africa, where I'm located, because I'm in Ghana, we also find that remittances represent a greater share of the gross domestic product of many countries in West Africa. And so Ghana, for instance, our GDP, the remittance share is 7.3% per the World Bank data 2020. I just published a book chapter with colleagues with IOM. And so this was the data we gathered when we were doing the publication. And when we also come to Ghana again, which I'll be spending the rest of the time talking about, the Bank of Ghana data shows that migrant remittances that are through formal channels to Ghana has increased over the years. And so from 2005, it increased from $1.5 billion US dollars to about 3.5 billion dollars. Sorry, I'm talking about billions, $1 billion in 2017. And so if you look at the past, if you look at the years, the 5 years, you could tell that remittances have increased significantly in Ghana. And the same with when you look at the World Bank data, it also shows that in West Africa, many countries have experienced this as well. Okay, so why the increases? Well, we acknowledge that there are some challenges, but we attribute, for instance, the Bank of Ghana, data that was collected by my Center for Migration Studies, which was funded by IOM. And currently I'm working with a colleague on the policy dimension, which we'll talk about later. The Bank of Ghana tells us that they have improved in collecting remittance data. And so capturing remittance data, they have improved, and that is why they have seen these increases. Again, migrants are also increasingly using formal channels, not to the desire of many nations, but again, when it comes to Ghana, there is an increase, and that also shows the increases in the remittances that we are talking about. Again, migrants themselves have also increased the amount they send. And when we talk about the major destination areas where remittances are flowing from, contrary to the view that most of these remittances come from Europe and United States, in Ghana, the work we have done shows that apart from European countries and the United States, most of these remittances are flowing from other African countries. And so that is something that we need to also pay attention to and not only focus outside the continent. Again, when we talk about the channels, so migrants transfer money from different, using different money transfer companies and financial institutions. And so in Ghana, we can talk about the bank-to-bank transfer, we can talk about money transfer company to bank, and also through mobile money systems. And so in Ghana, these MTCs, or the money transfer companies, work with financial institutions in distributing or maybe providing services for remittance recipients and senders. And when we talk about the uses, which is the last part I want to talk about in answering your question, the uses of remittances are varied. And the studies we have done so far shows that a large proportion of international financial transfers to Ghana are used for consumption, recurrent expenditure, including living expenses, education, hospital bills, marriage ceremonies, funerals, among others. But again, at the community and the national level, there are also some remittances geared towards development that we need to acknowledge. And so to sum up my first part of the discussion, remittances are important because of the various data that I have shown. They have varied uses, and the increasing contribution of migrants remittances to the home country is also having greater impact. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary, for this introduction. You have touched on so many issues that definitely will come back on in the during this discussion. But before we dig deeper in this, let me give the floor to Orria. Orria, as I mentioned earlier, she is a part of the. She is working for the UNDP. And she has some thoughts about these remittances. Orria.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Thank you very much. And well, let me express my gratitude to the IFAD team and to yourself for giving us the space to join you in this very strategic webinar. I am projecting a slide. I'm not sure if you're able to see it.
Yes, we are.
Okay, super. So I just thought it would be good to have some visuals. And of course, I'm going to go much more bigger and or more abstract, I will say, than what Mari has just presented, which was excellent and very concrete and super useful to, at least to me already. But I thought it would be just good to go into the numbers. You know, and why support to family remittances? Well, globally, it's 1 out of 10 people, but in Africa, we're talking 1 out of 5 people relies on remittances as a lifeline. And we're talking, you know, beyond the general comment on remittances consumption, which is something that we absolutely don't agree with. We're talking about remittances to cover for, you know, those basic needs of food, for clothing, for fuel, overall transport, and basic necessities. In 2019, we were talking in Africa of an $85 billion on remittances in the continent. We're talking about an average in the whole continent of 3% of the GDP. And here I have just highlighted 2 countries, South Sudan and Nigeria, where remittances represent 1/3 of the GDP. And in Nigeria, we're talking about remittances, the whole amount of the accounted remittances corresponding to the federal government budget. And of course, when we talk about, you know, from the Financing for Development agenda, when we talk about remittances and financing flows as such, we're talking about, you know, an amount that exceeds the foreign direct investment, private capital flows, and ODA. And in this case, it is interesting to know that we're talking about 5 times higher than ODA. But beyond the volume, what we're talking here, it's about cash in hand to the people, and to the people who are the best placed to prioritize what they need. And out of the total amount received by the people in African countries, 3/4 of the money is to purchase nutritious food or fund healthcare, education, and other housing expenses. And we are also talking about reaching a level of remittances in 2025 of $1 trillion to cover the basic needs. I thought also it will be useful to highlight some examples on how we know through different assessments, and particularly the ECA, the United European Economic Commission for Africa, has launched some very interesting reports on collecting data on remittances, and how in rural Nigeria remittances have indeed increased food security. In Ethiopia, the households have been able to rely on cash reserves instead of selling livestock during those hard times. And against the backdrop of the civil war in Somalia, remittances have to continue to provide that social and economic lifeline that have particularly provided some support to those vulnerable population. And I thought also another important fact of these remittances has to do with that access to a wider world, to access to that potential fourth industrial revolution that we're talking in the continent. It has been demonstrated that households in Ghana, Nigeria, Senegal, and Uganda had access through remittances to mobile phones and therefore internet, to radios, TVs, and computer. And this is related to what the digital and the fourth industrial revolution can do to all the SDGs. I'm going to stop there. Thanks very much. Over to you, Amadou.
Thank you so much, Orria, for this bird overview on remittances on the continent. You have mentioned some key issues, some interesting issues, mainly the usage and also the impact that it has on some families. But before I move back to Mary, let me just ask you straight away. We know that these are the facts. It has impact. Remittance has impact on the people, those who receive remittance now. But do you think that we should be very happy with what is happening today, the impact? Or do you think that it is important that we do something to make these remittances more impactful? And if that is the case, what should be the role of the countries, the government? What should be the key drivers for them to be able to leverage remittances?
Thank you. So you are asking me again, Amadou, right? Am I correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sorry. So indeed, we're not doing enough. We are not tapping into what remittances and the opportunities of remittances for the households and for the national priorities and local priorities of the government represent. As the Addis Ababa Action Agenda referred, remittances, of course, I mean, there is a lot of work to do. We need to work to decrease the transfer cost to that 3%, which is currently an SDG 10C goal. But we need to work on aligning what the financing flows of remittances, what they represent, aligning them and leveraging those opportunities with other financing flows. And as such, what I'm projecting here and what I'm sharing here is something related to the INFF, the Integrated National Financing Framework, which you might have heard, Mary, that we are also implementing in Ghana. It's happening in a number of African countries. At the moment, 38 ministries of finance have signed to join the initiative and tap into the diverse range of financing flows, including remittances. So making sure that we align the remittances and its governing policies and institutions with the national and local development priorities. And well, this initiative, the Integrated National Financing Framework, has an ultimate goal, which is to establish a financing strategy. Currently, it can be the financing strategy that has to do with the COVID-19 recovery plan, or in the new wave of the national development plans that are happening in the continent, it should be the backbone, the financing strategy. And this should contain the remittances element. So strategies, and here, I have highlighted 4 points. We're talking about, as a tool in UNDP, we have supported ministries of finance and ministries of planning at national and subnational level to map the diverse range of financing flows. And we have, a certain number of countries, and I'm including there Benin, Cameroon, Comoros, Gambia, Namibia, Nigeria, Liberia, and Sierra Leone so far, that have highlighted the need to work on remittances, either at national or local level, and the need to include diaspora in the conversation of the SDG financing dialogue. So we are talking about a tool that is already given as an entry and that is government-owned through the Ministry of Finance. We're talking about developing financing strategies that integrate and prioritize remittances. We're talking about setting up governing mechanisms on SDGs, but also on financing strategies that will engage platforms for bringing diaspora, but also will listen and create space for the recipient families. A last point, as UNDP, because we see that there is a lot of untapped potential still, to work on remittances at a national level, we are developing this regional project with a number of regional institutions, including what Amadou Cissé represents today, the African Institute of Remittances, and other partners, African Union, IOM, including IFAD, to bring forward some specific support. So I'm going to stop there, and happy to respond to any other point.
Thank you so much, Orria. Thank you for your time. I know that you have also some other commitments that you had prior to this meeting. So we will be very happy if you are with us. Otherwise, I think that ourselves and also the participants will be very happy to really discuss with you these issues. For now, we have our third panelist, Jules Touka, who has just joined us. I would like to give you just a few seconds to switch for those who are using the interpretation and all these things, because Jules Touka will talk to us in French. So let me shift to French. Bonjour Jules.
Bonjour à tout le monde. Je m'excuse.
Merci d'être avec nous. Nous savons que Jules, vous êtes expert à la communauté des États de l'Afrique centrale et que vous avez un programme qui est très intéressant sur les transferts de fonds. Les transferts de fonds qui représentent quand même, qui sont une bonne source pour beaucoup de familles en Afrique centrale comme dans d'autres pays en Afrique. Qu'est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire par rapport à votre organisation? Quelle est votre approche quand il s'agit des transferts de fonds? Et si vous voulez bien, vous allez nous partager avec nous quelques résultats sur l'étude que vous avez récemment commanditée et reçu les résultats au niveau de la zone. Très brièvement, en guise d'introduction, avant qu'on avance sur le débat beaucoup plus en détail sur ces questions-là. Quel est le statut et quelle est l'importance des transferts de fonds aujourd'hui en Afrique centrale?
Oui, bonjour, merci. J'espère que je suis bien suivi. Merci donc de nous donner la parole et l'occasion de partager cette expérience de l'Afrique centrale. L'Afrique centrale, au sens de la CEAC, de la Communauté économique des États de l'Afrique centrale, c'est 11 pays, n'est-ce pas? Angola, Burundi, Cameroun, Guinée, les deux Congos, Sao Tomé, et Centrafrique, Tchad, Rwanda, Gabon, Guinée équatoriale. Donc, c'est un espace, aujourd'hui, c'est 200 millions d'habitants sur 6 667 km². C'est aussi une zone d'attraction des immigrés. Parce que les populations immigrées, que ce soit au Gabon, déjà, c'est l'un des pays, je crois, après la Côte d'Ivoire, où le taux d'immigrés est le plus élevé. L'Angola aussi de plus en plus, parce que beaucoup, notamment de Ouest africains, y viennent pour chercher, n'est-ce pas, des nouvelles aventures. Le Cameroun, où la population nigériane dépasse les 2 millions d'habitants. Donc, c'est une région d'attraction pour les immigrés. Et en conséquence, les flux sont importants, malheureusement dans l'autre sens, n'est-ce pas? C'est-à-dire que l'étude qui a été faite avec un appui financier de l'OIM en 2019 révèle par exemple que entre 2010 et 2018, les flux à direction de la CEDEAO, des 16 pays de la CEDEAO, ont représenté 290 milliards. Donc, c'est quand même important, c'est beaucoup. Même si ces flux, je voulais quand même souligner que jusqu'à présent, dans les statistiques que l'on observe des flux de transfert, ce n'est que les flux d'envoi, n'est-ce pas? Là, il y a encore une difficulté à discerner qu'est-ce qui est vraiment flux d'un migrant, c'est-à-dire au sens d'une personne qui est installée pour au moins 1 an, n'est-ce pas? Alors que des autres flux, vous savez qu'aujourd'hui, il y a des flux, le Cameroun, l'Afrique centrale échange beaucoup avec des pays comme le Bénin. Vous avez des gens qui peuvent envoyer l'argent de manière précursive à leur voyage et arriver au Bénin et retirer. Donc, ce n'est pas le flux de migrants. On n'a pas encore bien affiné les statistiques pour pouvoir discerner dans ces flux-là qu'est-ce qui relève vraiment des flux de migrants. Donc, mais les flux sont importants. Au point qu'aujourd'hui, vous avez des services des bancaires comme au niveau des éco-banques qui sont dédiés vraiment à ce genre de transferts, éco-transferts, où quand vous allez dans ces agences, c'est vraiment saturé de personnes. Donc, comme je déplorais en même temps, les flux sont dans un seul, sont très élevés dans le sens Afrique centrale vers l'est de l'Afrique, notamment Afrique de l'Est. À l'intérieur même de la région, les flux sont beaucoup plus modestes, autour de 13 milliards seulement. Vous voyez, même pas 10%, à peine 5% de ce qui ressort, notamment entre les Rwanda et la RDC. Le pays qui réalise le plus, c'est la RDC. Bon, peut-être parce que en termes de population aussi, c'est le plus doté, c'est 80 millions quand même d'habitants. Donc, c'est pour dire qu'en termes de proportion au PIB, pour la RDC, c'est 3,3% du PIB. Et ce qui est un peu surprenant, c'est Sao Tomé, c'est un petit pays de moins de 200 000 habitants où les flux des migrants représentent 3,8%, Rwanda 2,4%, Burundi 1% et Cameroun presque 1%. Donc, voilà un peu ce que cette étude a pu relever. Mais comme je dis, les données méritent d'être affinées. Et cette étude a donc posé des défis. Peut-être que nous espérons, avec le concours des partenaires, et notamment l'Union africaine, essayer de voir comment les lever, régler ces défis-là. Notamment, le premier, c'est vraiment avoir la bonne information sur les flux des migrants. Donc, ça nécessite des outils statistiques, des enquêtes statistiques à améliorer. Et l'autre défi, c'est les systèmes de transfert eux-mêmes. Comme on l'a dit, aujourd'hui, les banques, très peu de banques ont développé des systèmes, des canaux financiers. Généralement, ils ont juste des guichets pour les agences spécialisées, genre MoneyGram ou Western Union, n'est-ce pas? Et il n'y a que EcoBank, que j'ai cité tantôt, qui a pu créer tout un couloir pour faciliter ce genre de transfert. Et en Afrique centrale, au sens de la CEMAC cette fois-ci, il y a quand même quelque chose qui se développe depuis cette année. le transfert par téléphone mobile. Donc, aujourd'hui au Gabon, je peux transférer l'argent au Cameroun via les téléphones mobiles. Ça, c'est déjà une petite percée qui conviendra ce sont les pistes vraiment qu'il va falloir densifier. Mais au final, il faut surtout améliorer les supports de collecte d'informations pour que, comme je le disais tantôt, qu'on puisse savoir exactement ce que représentent les transferts des migrants. Et aussi, maintenant, trouver les moyens de les canaliser. C'est ça un autre problème. La population migratoire, elle est importante. Il faut la rassurer. Si jusqu'à présent, les transferts vont de l'autre côté, il faut savoir aussi que les pays de la région ont beaucoup de migrants, notamment le Cameroun a beaucoup de migrants, peut-être pas en Afrique, mais au-delà même de l'Afrique. On s'attendrait à ce que les transferts vers le Cameroun soient aussi importants. Il y a aussi donc à chercher, il faut qu'on cherche à comprendre pourquoi ce n'est pas aussi important que lorsqu'on connaît le dynamisme de cette population de la diaspora camerounaise, par exemple, ailleurs. Donc, ça revient aux politiques de les rassurer, de créer les conditions pour que ces personnes soient sûres que leurs investissements seront bien sauvegardés. Voilà un peu ce que je peux dire sommairement sur ce point.
Merci Gilles. Nous comprenons que vous êtes au niveau de l'Afrique centrale à une phase initiale qui consiste à mieux comprendre en fait ce phénomène-là, à avoir beaucoup plus d'informations, beaucoup plus précises sur ces informations, mais toujours est-il qu'il y a des familles qui bénéficient de ça, quand bien même il est difficile aujourd'hui de quantifier cela. Cela veut dire que pour les populations, pour les gouvernements, c'est aussi assez difficile pour eux de pouvoir mettre en place des stratégies. Mais en tout état de cause, vous liez cela avec la migration. Et sur ce point, je vais retourner vers Mary. Mary, Gilles has mentioned something that is very important. It is the linkages between remittance and migration. We know that your field of expertise is mainly migration, but you have very keen interest on remittances. We have here some questions from the audience which are related to migration and what government should really do, mainly in this period of time of crisis, where we have observed so many returnees. So what would be the government do in a global, in a wider scale to really make these remittances more impactful among those who are even returnees?
Thank you very much, Mahmoud, and thank you for the other speakers for setting the ball also rolling. Yeah, so talking about returnees, and I'm sure you are talking about those who are particularly returning forcefully and perhaps may not have prepared before they are coming, if I'm right. Mahmoud?
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. So one of the things that we have learned, I mean, before we even move there, some of the challenges in the work we do, and as I said, we are in the middle of even implementing some of these projects. One of the key things, and also I was part of those drafting the diaspora policy for Ghana. And so in doing the consultative meetings with Ghanaian diaspora, one of the key things that came up is how irregular migrants or undocumented migrants could remit. Because these are people who are not recognized. And once you want to remit, remember the formal channels require you to produce documentation. They require you to have some addresses and all that. And so these are petty inconveniences to the irregular or undocumented migrants. And so it also has adverse effects on them when they decide to return. So they are likely to return. I mean, those who make the efforts do that through friends. So friends bring their money home, but we all know the risk associated with that. Some also come and find that the monies they thought they had remitted did not have any impact, or did not even reach home in the first place to accomplish what they are supposed to do. And so some of the things in our proposals we make, we know that governments are, for instance, the Ghana government is making some efforts, but some of the advice that, or some of the proposals we've made, is how they can negotiate with major host countries. And so we can take lessons from Mexico, for instance, where the government has in the US, because it's a major destination area for Mexico, the government has negotiated with some banks where migrants can transfer their monies to their home country at a lower cost. And so that kind of, when it comes to reducing remittances, when it comes to encouraging undocumented or irregular migrants to also remit, there needs to be some bilateral agreements, because throughout the discussions of solution, you realize that trust in government is one of the key things that migrants don't have. Migrants don't trust their governments. The diaspora don't trust their governments. And we need to and this is because of the politicization of these issues. So we need to depoliticize it, and so that people can trust what the governments are doing. The governments can have bilateral agreements so that some of these remittances, people in vulnerable situations can also remit home. And so that these are some of the issues that we can also look at. Again, some of the efforts which, for instance, the Ghana government is doing, but it still needs to be strengthened, is the setting up of diaspora desk. And so the intention is to help diaspora within the missions abroad. And so you go to US, it's a major destination country. You go to UK, it's a major destination country for Ghana. And so they have a diaspora desk where migrants can approach them to tell them their problems. So one of the suggestions we have in our diaspora policy, which is a draft anyway, is to allow migrants, especially those in vulnerable situations, including undocumented migrants, to approach these desks, to have a means of transferring their money to their families back home, because these people have families. And again, because of the high expectations of being abroad, they are still expected, irrespective of their status, to do something back home. Otherwise, when they come, it affects the way they are received. Studies have also shown that if you don't remit home, when you come back home, family support is not there. And family is a major support when it comes to return migrants. And so one of the suggestions is to have that desk to help irregular migrants or those undocumented to be able to transfer money also through those channels. And so these are some, but there are also some other suggestions. Maybe I can come back to it later. Thank you.
Definitely, because we are running out of time. Let me just go back to Orria, linking this issue of migration. You know that in the SDGs, we have so many indicators that are related, so many targets that are related to migration. But one target I can say is linked to migration and remittances. It is the target 10C, which is dealing with the cost of remittances. We won't be discussing that further, but let us have your view with regard to this issue of how we can, in this context, how can we really work further to make sure that the linkages between migration and development are there.
Thank you very much. And of course, I mean, we are talking about countries that have developed different strategies to engage diaspora abroad, have set up those diaspora desks, have approved of those diaspora policies. Some countries have, gone beyond and even set up these compacts, diaspora compacts, which were specific agreements, like the case of Benin. And so we know that, things are happening, but there is still much more work to do. And there is this need to make sure that whenever we talk about engaging diaspora, we're looking into specific incentives, and we're talking potentially investment related incentives, but also citizenship law related incentives and other regular, human rights related incentives that governments are already envisaging. And we know that for the case of Ethiopia, this is a great example on how the government has decided to look into how do we properly engage diaspora, as an investor to the national priorities. But beyond that aspect, there is this other specific aspect on how do we leverage, because there was a question that was asked in the chat, and is, I don't want to give to the government. I want to still provide funding, for the basic needs to my family. Or I might be able to trust the local authorities, But so then the whole point is, how do we leverage? How do we provide opportunities for MSME development? How do we, think of a specific financing instruments where those remittances could be used or could be served as guarantee? So, of course, we're talking about mechanisms included in this agenda that are developed to reduce the transaction cost of remittances. And there is the whole agenda on digital remittances that we are not talking about, and that many regulatory bodies are still not welcoming. There is still an opportunity even on cryptocurrency, and opportunities of the digital currencies, which could be used as a transfer. We know that the cost of transfer from Africa to Europe, it is still high. But what it is very high, which is, if I'm not mistaken, at 40% level, is the intra-African cost. So,
okay.
sorry.
Yeah, definitely, Orria. You have mentioned some key issues to the digital remittances and also the prerequisites, what needs to be done. And those issues, I'm sure that will be discussed in the next sessions and the session following, and also in the global forum. These are very important points. Whatever we know is that if you have to design any policies on remittances, you have to put it in a much broader issue, which is related to the policy on migration and all these things. These are really prerequisites that we advise to our governments, and also we advise to that we as organizations, we would like, we work together. Just before we conclude, because we are running out of time, just a few minutes ago to close this. Just Gilles, let me just ask you just one key questions. What do you think? Qu'est-ce que vous pensez que les États de l'Afrique centrale peuvent faire actuellement pour mieux comprendre ce phénomène des transferts de fonds et mieux avoir beaucoup plus d'impact au niveau des populations? Juste en 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît, M. Touka.
Bon, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire exactement pour avoir plus d'impact? Je crois que l'exemple nous vient toujours de la région, parce que dans l'étude qu'on a faite, le cas du Rwanda a été très salué, n'est-ce pas? À partir du Rwanda Development Board, et on crée vraiment tout un service dédié à sécuriser les transferts de la diaspora. C'est ça que j'ai cru entendre. Il faut, parce que ceux qui n'investissent pas dans leur pays, c'est parce que pour l'instant, ils l'ont fait par le passé de manière informelle avec la famille et les amis. Parfois, ça se termine très mal. Donc, il faut sécuriser. Vraiment, il faut que les pouvoirs publics prennent à cœur cette question, n'est-ce pas, comme le modèle du Rwanda, pour permettre...
D'accord. Nous comprenons que le Rwanda joue un rôle important dans cette zone et que donc ce modèle peut servir aussi aux autres pays. I would like at this point to thank all of my panelists here. Mary, we have also Orria and Gilles. Thank you so much. I think that these are very interesting debates that we'll definitely have the opportunity to discuss further. And for now, we are going to have the next session, which will be moderated by Saud Farouk. The role of mobile payment and the private sector, the role of the private sector and the mobile payment that we talked about very quickly in these sessions. Farouk or Pedro, whoever, hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amadou. Thank you so much for